Even the existing environmental laws, problematic as they may be, there are ways to use them to protect the environment. And at every opportunity, the government has decided to side with coal companies, side with the salmon industry. So ultimately, it's going to be about political will rather than legislation, I think.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. The Treasurer knows.
I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day, I'm Ebony Bennett and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains economics, politics and policy in plain English. Australia is an incredible country. It's blessed with an incredible natural environment, if only we'd protect it.
The government wants to monetise the trees for carbon credits, and it doesn't want to gazette the park until it's got a carbon credit method in place and approved.
Images of rotting dead salmon, images of live fish being thrown carelessly into bins and suffocating to death is not what they market to the public.
The workers aren't at fault here, it's the big corporate bosses who are at fault, and the political establishment who for decades have allowed big corporations to effectively self-regulate.
We're one of the richest countries on the planet. If only our governments were brave enough to ensure that wealth got shared all around.
Choices matter. And the Australian government collects more money from HECS than it does from the Petroleum Resources Rent Tax. Thank you, children. You're the backbone of our economy, not the gas industry.
Australia could have such nice things, but with an underfunded health system, social security payments that keep the most vulnerable of us below the poverty line, and a totally cooked housing market, it feels like the good life is a long way off for many Australians, and there's a reason for that. Joining me today to discuss protecting our environment and ensuring that Australians get their fair share from the country's resources is Australia Institute Research Director Rod Campbell. G'day, Rod.
Wow, that's a lot to do in 10 minutes, Eb.
I'm sure you and I can do it, Rod, if anyone can.
Let's go.
In Parliament this week, the government's expected to introduce its reforms to our national environment laws. A couple of weeks back, I spoke with the Australia Institute co-CEO Leanne Minchell about the government's negotiations over these laws. What's the latest word from up on the Hill?
Yeah, so you'll be shocked to hear, Eb, that there's been some politics played with Australian environmental laws. And it looks like the Coalition don't want to give Labor a win. The Greens keep annoyingly wanting to protect nature and for environmental laws to protect the environment.
Where do they get off?
The government seems to be in the middle. And yeah, it looks like it's descending into a fight that probably isn't going to get past this year. And that's probably a good thing because the state of the laws isn't very good.
So Guardian Australia was reporting that the government is looking to add a so-called national interest provision. What would that mean for our environment? What are the practical implications of introducing such a national interest provision?
Yeah, I mean, what it looks like to me is basically a get-out-of-jail-free clause for the baddies. Remember, before the last election, Australia Institute had a lot to do with this. We saw the government and the opposition rush through changes that weakened environmental laws to ensure that salmon farming could continue in Tasmania. And they had to do it through legislation. They had to change the laws because, wait for it, the laws were about to work. The laws were about to stop salmon farming that was affecting an endangered species, the Maugean skate. So I think what the national interest provision is about, and the kind of get-out-of-jail-free cardness of it, is about next time they wouldn't have to go back to Parliament to pass those laws to keep that project going. They'd just have they could just play the card.
So we'll have these new environment laws operating over here and the minister can just whip out his get-out-of-jail-free card for any industry or project that...
Yeah, we could have great environmental laws that were doing great things, and as soon as they looked like they might work, then the minister could play the card and they wouldn't work anymore.
Yeah.
We discussing critical minerals and rare earths, and we're going to be signing an agreement that's been negotiated over a period of 4 or 5 months.
Today's agreement on critical minerals and rare earths is just taking it to the next level, seizing those opportunities which are before us.
In about a year from now, we'll have so much critical mineral and rare earths that you won't know what to do with them. They'll be worth about $2.
The Prime Minister signed a critical minerals deal with Donald Trump last week, and Environment Minister Murray Watt has been arguing that that kind of a deal would be at risk if the national interest test provision and this new kind of reforms aren't supported. I mean, how important is this deal to Australia? Should we be ramming through legislation to facilitate it?
Gee, you ask all the tough questions, Eb. Should we be throwing out our unique natural wonders for a deal with Donald Trump that we don't know the fine print for? Give me a minute to think about it, but I reckon I'm going to say no. I mean, let's back up for a minute. The mining industry is small in Australia. In terms of government revenue, mining taxes paid by the mining industry is about 3 cents in the dollar of revenue in Australia. It's about 2% of jobs. The mining industry is small. We do not need to bend over backwards. We do not need to throw out Australians' endangered species and unique environments to enable more mining to make Donald Trump happy. Is there a need for different minerals? Is there a need for mining? Of course there is. But do we throw out the baby with the bathwater and do we do whatever Donald Trump wants us to do? No, of course we don't. Let's ignore the noise and get on with actually protecting the environment.
I know that mining is a small employer and doesn't contribute a huge amount to the economy, but we do have some like iron ore. I know we export a lot of that overseas. We export a huge amount of liquid natural gas overseas, lots of coal as well. We're a big exporter of lots of things. How does critical minerals, whatever they are, compare to some of those more established industries, I guess?
Yeah, they're small. So, when people think of the Australian mining industry, they're generally thinking of iron ore. Australia's the biggest producer of iron ore in the world. We are equivalent. Our share of the global iron ore market is equivalent to all of OPEC's share of the oil market.
So not small.
So no. So we're a big deal in iron ore. We're a big deal in coal. We're a pretty big deal in things like bauxite, big-ish in gold. But we're not particularly big in terms of other minerals. We could be. We have globally significant deposits of lithium and of a range of other minerals. I guess when we say critical minerals, it's always important to remember that that's not an adjective that is used by chemists or metallurgists or anybody like that. It's a purely political designation. So different countries have different lists of minerals that they consider critical.
Yeah.
And so to what extent they're actually critical to our way of life, I would suggest is generally pretty overblown. Australia has lots of potential to produce minerals that many countries consider critical. But again, do we need to do whatever Donald Trump wants in order to dig them up? No, of course we don't.
Yeah. So, Rod, I know the Australian Institute has done a huge amount of research in this area in years past. I mean, what have you learned about that trade-off between the environment and these kinds of extractive projects?
Yeah, there's a great example of what's going on in terms of critical minerals, mineral sands, and the potential trade-offs down in East Gippsland in Victoria, where the Australia Institute has done work with a group called Mine Free Glenelladale, where a bunch of farmers are basically opposing a mineral sands mine right next to their very heavily invested in horticultural activities. They grow most of the lettuce in Eastern Australia down there, just across the river from where a company is proposing to build a mineral sands mine. And so we've been arguing with Mine Free Glenelladale successfully in the big hearings on this a couple of years ago that the potential impact on farmers from this big mineral sands project and all its critical minerals actually isn't worth it, that the royalties and taxes and jobs that would come out of the mineral sands mine in no way come close to the potential impacts on those horticultural activities. We've been arguing that for a while, and nothing Donald Trump says is going to change my mind.
Yeah. So, Rod, I want to move now into talking about the kind of wealth that Australia extracts from these extractive industries. And you recently did some research on a mining company that might be familiar to long-time Follow the Money listeners, Adani, and found some unusual things in their books from a few years back. Can you tell us what you noticed?
Yeah, so what we saw was the Queensland Revenue Office, who are in charge of collecting taxes and royalties in Queensland. They actually took Adani to court a couple of years ago, alleging that they hadn't paid enough royalties. And then last month, we saw that the new Queensland government instructed that court case be abandoned. And so I got to thinking, I wonder how much money we're talking about. Who could have guessed that Adani might try and diddle us? I mean, here's
no warning signs.
No warnings at all. Here's a company that there's still an arrest warrant out over bribery charges for its founder, Gautam Adani. Who would have guessed that these people might try and rip us off? Anyway, no estimates had ever been published on how much we were talking about. So I pulled out the financial papers that are filed with ASIC, the corporate regulator, and some of the Queensland government data. And what I found is that in 2023, Adani was selling coal mainly to India, probably to friendly companies, possibly related companies. So it was selling coal to India at $100 a tonne, which is fine, except the market price at the time was $280 a tonne.
$280, and they were selling it for close to $100.
Yeah, so they were selling coal at a third of the market price. And what that meant was Queensland missed out on $400 million in royalties by our estimation. And I invite anybody to look at our paper and have a look at our working, because nobody can tell me why or if we're wrong. And it's another example of an Australian government willing to literally give away Australia's resources for nothing to some of the worst people in the world.
Yeah.
What is going on?
$400 million is not a small amount of money to just give away, essentially.
It's not a small amount of money. The Queensland government is patting itself on the back for giving families a back-to-school bonus of $100 for people with school children. That could have been $400. The former Queensland government was proposing giving free school lunches to school kids. That could have paid for a year's worth of school lunches. So, yeah, I can't believe I have to say this, but $400 million is quite a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, what has the Queensland government's response been in general to this issue? They dropped the case. What's happened since then?
That's what's happened, Eb.
What? They've dropped the case and that's it?
Nothing.
Yeah, they don't care.
No. Well, they're not saying anything more about what has happened with the case. They're saying that they've come to an agreement with Adani, and Adani has committed to invest $50 million in the mine, so $50 million in itself. But I think what's going on is actually there's a deal between the Queensland government and Adani over a few different regulatory arrangements, probably relating to the coal export terminal that Adani runs at Abbott Point, where other coal miners are putting them under pressure to regulate Adani and its activities there. So I think there's some kind of quid pro quo going on, but who knows? And no one will tell us.
Yeah,
Certainly no one tells us we're wrong.
I was going to say, and no one's said anything publicly about any of those arrangements. Adani isn't the only company that's been kind of getting away with blue murder here.
The Australian public thinks that the gas industry should be paying for the gas. The economists think we should be doing it. There's plenty of examples internationally of countries doing it.
Billions have been siphoned from Australian households and businesses straight into the pockets of multinational gas giants.
The ACTU have put up a proposal to put a 25% tax on the revenue that these multinational gas corporations are getting when they sell our gas overseas. And what that would do is provide a huge disincentive for them to sell our gas to the global spot market and an incentive to provide it to Australians instead.
It's a democracy. We can keep doing dumb things if we want to, but if this government or a future government wants to have more money for schools, more money for hospitals, it's sitting right in front of us.
The Australian gas industry, and particularly the gas export industry, is another, what did the ATO call them? A systemic non-payer?
Systemic non-payers of tax.
Yeah. So they've got a reputation, let's put it that way. Recently, the ACTU, the Australian Council of Trade Unions, suggested replacing the Petroleum Resources Rent Tax with a simple export tax for gas. I mean, before we get into the specifics of that proposal, what is the PRRT supposed to do? Is it kind of the main tax for the gas industry? What is the PRRT?
Yeah, let's go back in time to when Dirty Dancing was in the cinemas. Rick Astley tapes were cool. Things like that. You probably can't remember those days, Ed. But in the 80s, basically the Commonwealth decided to get rid of a few different royalties and a few different ways to charge for offshore oil and gas, and to bring in PRRT, the Petroleum Resource Rent Tax. So the tax would only be paid kind of on profits that were considered above normal levels. So investors are getting a fair return, but beyond that fair return, this tax was going to apply. And look, in short, it actually worked pretty well for a while, and it worked while Australia had an oil industry, a modest-sized oil industry, and a gas industry that was just a kind of offshoot that supplied domestic use. But fast forward 30 years, and we have 30 or 40 years, and we have a gas industry that is abundantly focused on exporting gas as a liquid on ships to Asia, and it's the oil industry aspect of it that is an afterthought now. And so most of the PR, or a lot of the PRRT that gets paid, is still on the oil side of it, even though that's hardly registers as part of the industry output now.
Yeah.
And basically, in a nutshell, we had a tax that worked pretty well when it was an oil industry with gas as an afterthought. Now it's gas with oil as an afterthought, but we didn't really change the tax system properly, and that's why it's failing so badly.
So when we say it's failing, it's not bringing in the revenue that it should.
Yeah, PRRT, recent data out, it's at a 3-year low. It's down to about 1.4, 1.5 billion in the year. Remember, public revenue in Australia is about $1 trillion a year.
Yeah.
So, $1 and a bit billion from an industry that's one of the largest exporting industries in the country is really not a lot.
Yeah, it's a pittance.
That's what failure looks like.
Yeah. So then the ACTU's specific proposal is to suggest replacing the PRRT with a simple export tax for gas. How would that work?
Yeah, because it's simple. The key word there is simple. It looks at gas export revenue. That's easy to work out.
Mm-hmm.
All the companies have to report it, and taking a percentage of that, it's really simple. The PRRT and why it failed is because it's complicated, and it's complicated to apply it to an industry that sucks gas out of the ground, then kind of sells that gas to itself, then turns it into a liquid with equipment that costs a lot of money, that can be used to offset some of those tax payments, and then it gets put on a boat and then it gets sent off. It's complicated. So the ACTU's proposal is a simple tax on revenue, easy to do.
Yeah.
PRRT, very complicated, very easy to find loopholes in. That's why it's complicated. that's why heading towards something simpler is probably a good idea.
And so overall, because it's simpler, you'd expect it to be more effective and bring in more revenue?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Have we done the calculations on that? How much it would bring in?
Yeah, we think it'll be about $12.5 billion a year.
Every year?
Yeah.
And what are we pulling now from the PRRT?
Between 1 and 2, sometimes under 1. So, yeah, it'd be 10 times, 10, 12, 15 times more.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, definitely sounds simpler and more effective. I guess that brings us back to the politics of things. And one of the reasons why the gas industry is paying next to nothing is because governments have kind of let them get away with that, essentially. Now we're seeing these new environment laws come through the parliament, but it's not clear to me that even though we're supposed to see stronger protections for the environment from these reforms, that any of these kinds of new gas export projects or gas fields or things like this will actually be captured by these new laws either. Does that seem like a fair assessment to you?
Yeah, it is a fair assessment, because one thing that the government's made clear is that they have no intention of making climate change a part of Australia's environment laws. And, I'm sure you talked about this with Leanne the other week. It's a pretty crazy situation that Australia finds itself in, where we have a minister for the environment except for the atmosphere and a different minister for the atmosphere, and never the twain shall meet. But that's where we're at, and that's what seems to be proposed. And I think it really is all about political will. Remember, a year or two ago, the Environment Council of Central Queensland and Environmental Justice Australia put together a series of court cases and proposals that they called the Living Wonders cases. And basically what they did was present to then Minister Tanya Plibersek ways that she could consider climate change within existing environment laws. And when push came to shove, what Tanya Plibersek decided to do was, she had a choice between siding with the environment groups or siding with the coal mines. And when it came to going to court, she sided with, can you guess, Eb?
Oh, I'm going to take a big punt here and guess the coal industry.
Yeah, in court, she sided with the coal industry. And so what that shows is that even the existing environmental laws, problematic as they may be, there are ways to use them to protect the environment. And indeed, Australia Institute, Bob Brown Foundation and others found ways to use those environmental laws to protect the environment just before the election in relation to the salmon industry. There's ways to do it. People have shown how it can be done. And at every opportunity, the government has decided to side with coal companies, side with the salmon industry. So ultimately, it's going to be about political will rather than legislation, I think.
And in the meantime, every day Australians are losing out on millions, if not more than that, in revenue we could be getting from these industries that are harming endangered species, harming the environment, and we're just kind of giving it away.
Over the last 4 years, $170 billion worth of liquefied natural gas was exported based on gas that paid zero royalties and zero PRRT. The money is flying out the door, and we're not doing much about it.
And once it flies out the door, we can't sell that gas twice, can we? It's gone forever.
That'd be a challenge for any engineers or physicists out there on how we could recapture that gas and get it back in the ground and do it all again.
Yeah. All right. Well,
might be easier than convincing the current government to actually just protect the environment, though. So, maybe it's worth a go.
On that cheery note, we might wrap it up there. Thanks, Rod.
Thanks, Eb.
Strong environment laws need to prevent coal and gas expansion. You can add your name to our petition calling on the federal government to be able to stop new coal and gas at our website, australiainstitute.org.au. This episode was recorded on Tuesday, the 28th of October, and things may have changed since recording. Our theme music is by Jonathan McBeat from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm your host, Ebony Bennett. Thanks for listening.